Attorney General presents in court proposed committee stage amendments to the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Counsel for the petitioners questioned the binding nature of the document. The government has not held any discussions regarding the MCC Compact, says Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa.
State Minister worried about the Gazette notification that determines the price of coconut.
Owner of the candy building which collapsed, claiming 3 lives, remanded.
Hello there, very good evening and welcome to Primetime News on TV1. Those for the headlines, now news in detail. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa said that there is no discussion at this moment about the Millennium Challenge Cooperation Agreement. The Prime Minister made these remarks when we met with the heads of electronic media and print media editors this morning.
The discussion that was held at Temple Trees centered around the 20th Amendment to the Constitution.
You have not made your stance on the 20th Amendment as of yet.
The
Sri Lanka Freedom Party has appointed a special committee to study the 20th Amendment. What is your view on that?
This is being first discussed in the cabinet and then it will be discussed within the government faction as well. Finally, we present the stance of the government before the people.
Through the 20th Amendment, the role of the Prime Minister becomes nominal to some extent. You held a discussion with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently. The 13th Amendment has been discussed at that meeting. Can you share the contents of that meeting? Foreign media reported that he pressurized you to implement the 13th Amendment.
An intellectual board with a clean slate spearheaded by President Council Ramesh De Silva has been appointed by the cabinet. Their ambition is to present the constitution as soon as possible as well. We asked for the 2/3 majority to abolish the 19th Amendment and to bring the 20th Amendment. So we hope to amend the constitution in the short term, mid-term and in the long term.
However, the opposition claimed that there is a group in the government who is not in favor of the 20th Amendment. That group say that they will not allow the 20th Amendment to be passed in Parliament. Is the government prepared for this? Are you ready to obtain the 2/3 in Parliament?
We already have the 2/3 majority. Certain parties have their own ideologies. Certain individuals also have their own ideologies. So when all of those opinions come together in Parliament, they present one opinion in Parliament.
Attorney General Dapulo de Oliveira submitted to court today a document that included committee stage amendments the government is planning on making to the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. The document was submitted to court when 39 fundamental rights applications filed against the 20th Amendment was taken up for consideration today.
The petitions are being considered by a 5-judge bench headed by Chief Justice Jayanta Jayasuriya. At the beginning of the hearings today, Chief Justice Jayanta Jayasuriya said that court expects to conclude the hearings of the petitions by this Friday. Thereby, 30 minutes was allocated for each counsel representing the petitioners. The Supreme Court will hear submissions on 39 petitions and 7 intervening petitions. The MTV-MBC network also filed a petition against the 20th Amendment on the right to free speech and freedom of media. Before the counsel for the petitioners made oral submissions in court today, Attorney General Dapulo de Oliveira informed court that the government intends on making certain amendments to the 20th Amendment bill at the committee stage in Parliament. The Attorney General also presented a document containing these proposed amendments. These proposed committee stage amendments include provisions for the Auditor General to be appointed by the President after inquiring into the observations of the Parliamentary Council. It adds that only a qualified auditor can be appointed to this post. The committee stage amendments also propose that the office of the Prime Minister and the President could be audited by the Auditor General. The committee stage amendments also include provisions for the President to seek the observations of the Parliamentary Council when appointing the Inspector General of Police and the General Secretary of Parliament. The amendments also propose for the number of members of the Elections Commission to be increased to 5. The amendments include provisions for the fundamental rights applications filed against presidents before the passage of the 20th Amendment to continue in court. This has also proposed for the President to have the power to appoint the Secretary to the Prime Minister. Under the proposed committee stage amendments, the President will only be able to dissolve Parliament 2.5 years after Parliament first meets. However, President's Counsel M.A. Sumantiran, representing a petitioner, said that his clients had challenged the 20th Amendment to the Constitution that was placed on the order paper of Parliament. He emphasized that the court must consider the amendment that has been placed on the order paper of Parliament and not any other document. Counsel for the petitioners pointed out that giving the President full immunity from suit would create a position above the law of the country. They submitted that therefore the clause to reintroduce a blanket immunity for the President should not only be passed by a 2/3 majority in Parliament, but it also must be approved through a referendum. Speaking on the clause that would allow dual citizens to contest and hold a seat in Parliament, Attorney at Law Suren Fernando said that since dual citizens have sworn an allegiance to a foreign nation, this clause affects the sovereignty of the people. He added that as such, this clause too must be approved by the people at a referendum. Attorney at Law Suren Fernando added that the duty of the President included in the current Constitution to be responsible to Parliament has been repealed through the 20th Amendment and re-included as a separate clause in the same amendment. He added that there is a suspicion as to if this clause requiring the President to be responsible to Parliament would be removed at the committee stage in Parliament. Counsel for the petitioners submitted that although certain factions contended that it is the 19th Amendment to the Constitution that is being repealed, the entire Constitution must be considered as a single document. The council submitted that accordingly, the 20th Amendment does not propose the repeal of a single amendment, but some of the most fundamental principles of our Constitution, and thus it has to be approved by the general public at a referendum.
Provisions that go against the public mandate will not be inserted in the 20th Amendment. If the Supreme Court rules that this goes against the people's mandate, we are ready to make the relevant changes.
ඔබතුමා විශ්ව සංශෝධන සම්බන්ධයෙන් බොහෝ විවේචන ඉදිරිපත් කරා කමිටුවක් පත් කරා. හැබැයි මේ කමිටුවේ වාර්තාවන් විශ්ව සංශෝධන ඇතුළත් කළා නැහැ.
විසාකාවගේ තාත්තත් දුන්නු පළවෙනි අවවාදය තමයි දුවට ඇතුළු ගිනි පිටතට නොදෙව කියන.
ඇතුළේ ගිනි තියෙනවා කියන්නේ.
අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අපි ඇතුළේ ඇමති මණ්ඩලය අතර දීර්ඝ සංවාදයක් ඇති වුණා විශ්ව සංශෝධනය ගැන. අපි එක පක්ෂයක් නෙවෙයි සන්දානයක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ අපිට විවිධ මත තියෙන නිසා. අවසාන වශයෙන් අපේ තීන්දුව ආණ්ඩුවේ මතයේ විදිහට තනි තීන්දුවක් තමයි එළියට ගේන්නේ.
ජනාධිපතිවරණයේ ඔබතුමාගේ කණ්ඩායම දිගින් දිගටම කියපු කාරණා තමයි 19 සංශෝධනය කියන්නේ අයියි මල්ලි ආණ්ඩු කරන්න කියාපු සංශෝධනය කියලා. දැන් එහෙම කියාපු සංශෝධනය නම් ඔබතුමාලට මේක මෙහෙම තියන් ගිහිල්ලා නව ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් හදන්න පුළුවන්.
අපිට අයියි මල්ලි සිටින නිසා මේ අවස්ථාවේ ඇත්තම ගැටලුවක් නැහැ. නමුත් අයියලා මල්ලිලා බලලා ව්‍යවස්ථා හදන්න වෙන්නේ.
අලුත් ව්‍යවස්ථාව තව අවුරුද්දකින් එනවා නම් ඒ දක්වා ඔබතුමාලට යන්න පුළුවන්.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa spent his first year in office as president with the United National Party government and the COVID-19 pandemic. There are 4 more years. He is facing obstacles towards executing his duties during this period. Our primary aim of abolishing the 19th Amendment is to remove these obstacles.
The National Movement for a Just Society has launched a joint program against the 20th Amendment to the Constitution together with the opposition parties and several other factions.
I state with responsibility that after this president was appointed, we unanimously approved all suggested names. During the past 4.5 years, all 10 of us made collective decisions. I must especially note that even when Mahinda Rajapaksa was the opposition leader and even when he was the Prime Minister, all those in these civil societies made decisions jointly.
We are at a time where everyone must come together to safeguard the independence and democracy of the people. The 20th Amendment to the Constitution has been created with no one to claim responsibility for. The Prime Minister has been brought down to an extent where the President has completely disregarded him. The 20th Amendment has made the Prime Minister a coin, no longer in use.
අගමැතිවරයා මේ රටේ අවලංගු කාසියක් විදියට පත් වෙයි. එදා චන්ද්‍රිකා ආණ්ඩුවේ හිටපු විමල් වීරවංශලත් එක්ක
We remember how Vimal Veeravansa during Chandrika Bandaranaike's time led the team to pass the 17th Amendment to the Constitution. But the National Organizations Collective have opposed certain provisions of the 20th Amendment. While opposing this, they say that the 19th was brought in against the Rajapaksas. What was against the Rajapaksas? Was it the Independent Commission or was it the Audit Commission? All powers vested in Mahinda Rajapaksa was not used because he was politically insensitive. If this does not stop here, it will lead to a massive disaster.
නැති වුණොත් මේක මහා විශාල අපරාධයක් වෙනවා මේ රටට. දැන් මේකලා කියන්නේ ජනාධිපති.
They say that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa should be strengthened. Keep doing it. There is no issue. But he is already powerful with a 2/3 majority. His brother is the Prime Minister. Another brother is in charge of the economy. That is also an added power to the President. So what more does he want?
ඒක අතර ඇයි මේක නැති කරන්නේ?
During the committee stages, parliamentarians will be able to intervene into these matters. This is being taken up at the Supreme Court as well. That is extremely good for a democratic country. Therefore, we believe that the distorted, ridiculous and dangerous political culture that was created through the 19th Amendment can be rectified through the 20th Amendment. By doing that, we will be able to progress to a certain extent. After this is done, the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna government will work towards introducing a new constitution at the earliest possible occasion.
ශ්‍රී ලංකා පොදු ජන පෙරමුණේ ආණ්ඩුව වැඩ කරනවා.
කිසියම් හෝ මන්ත්‍රීවරයෙක්ට
If any parliamentarian hopes to propose changes to this, we will present those suggestions to the Prime Minister. We decided to propose these changes in Parliament if they are considered to be suitable after being studied by the committee appointed by the Prime Minister.
වෙනවා නම් ඒව ගෙනීමට පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රී කණ්ඩායමේ තීරණය.
අද මේ සංශෝධන ගැන
When members of the ruling party are also expressing critical remarks about the amendment, the Prime Minister appointed a committee to study this. They completely disregarded this committee and said that the draft bill of the 20th Amendment will be presented in its original form. Some politicians are trying to become clean by claiming that they were not involved in this. Who are behind these activities? If the people's representatives are not involved in this, then who does the invisible hand behind this belong to? Just imagine the type of individuals who have been backing these matters. What is their motive? I recall how the Sri Lanka Freedom Party parliamentarians and Maithripala Sirisena took a pledge before Sobhita Thera on curbing the powers of the executive. I wish to awaken this memory and ask them to speak to their conscience. It is people like Mandela who should be considered as exemplary figures and not Mugabe's, Idi Amin's, Hitler's and Mussolini's.
මුගාබෙලා ඉඩි අමීන්ලා නෙමෙයි, හිට්ලර්ලා මුසෝයිල්ලා නෙමෙයි.
The outcome of the 1994 presidential election was a result of a massive political transformation within the community that had taken place since 1977. Similarly, the outcome of the 2019 election was a result of the test carried out on the transformation that occurred in 2015. Generally, I am very much optimistic over the country's future in terms of politics. I feel that politics in our country is heading towards a populist nature. The people are not afraid now. The Sri Lankan society is highly matured in terms of politics. It has changed governments in all elections since 1952, although that was not the case on some occasions. We know that it is a politically active society. We are able to unite together by making use of this active nature. We should be able to incorporate people into discussions. Then what would be left to do is to think for the future.
While the 20th Amendment is in conversation, a broad discussion regarding the 13th Amendment has begun. This discussion has been given new life with the recent discussions held between Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and the Indian Prime Minister. Today, a few members of the government expressed the following views in this regard.
මේ 13 සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඉන්දියාවේ ස්ථාවරය. ඔවුන් පවසන්නේ මේ 13 ක්‍රියාත්මක කළ යුතුයි කියන ස්ථාවරයක ලංකාවත් එතන ඉන්නවද කියන දේ අපිට දැනගන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ.
බොහොම පැහැදිලිව ඒ සම්බන්ධව මම ඒ සාකච්ඡාවට සම්බන්ධ වුණා ඡායවේදී.
Clearly, our Prime Minister was involved in a discussion. The Indian Prime Minister was mentioning the decision made at the discussion. Our Prime Minister spoke regarding the entire constitution and the granting of complete equality to all races within the country under a new constitution.
නව ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් ගැන කතා කරා.
රජයේ ස්ථාවරය.
Speaking about the government stance, the first answer is that the 13th Amendment is a part of our constitution. The second answer is we are going to make a new constitution. The third is that a new discussion is expected to be held regarding the 13th Amendment with regard to the new constitution. Therefore, we also have to pay attention to the opinion of India. In the same manner, we also have to pay attention to the opinion in our country. So I believe we will take into consideration both opinions when constructing a new constitution. However, this is the stance held by India with regard to the 20th Amendment.
Both leaders also exchanged views on reconciliation in Sri Lanka. Prime Minister called on the new government in Sri Lanka to work towards realizing the expectations of Tamils for equality, justice, peace and dignity within a united Sri Lanka by achieving reconciliation nurtured by the full implementation of the constitutional provisions. He emphasized that full implementation of the 13th Amendment to the Sri Lankan constitution is essential for carrying forward the process of peace and reconciliation. The position of Government of India on this matter is well known. We have always stood for peace and reconciliation, highlighted by our Prime Minister during the summit.
The provincial councils that have had a natural death shouldn't be revived. Prime Minister Modi has sent a small gift with a release. He has said that they will issue $150 million and to implement the 13th Amendment. Thank you for the $150 million, but what right do you have to instruct Sri Lanka to implement the 13th Amendment? We are ready to sacrifice our lives to not bow down to Indian colonization, but we are not ready to sit on the Indian side. There is no need to talk about a 13th because there is no 13th in the new constitution.
A discourse has been created over the prices of coconuts in the country. This has been in view of the maximum retail prices that were imposed through a gazette recently. The national organizer of the All Ceylon Farmers Federation, Namal Karunaratne, expressed his views in Kurunagala in this regard.
It will require 44 months for a coconut flower to blossom into a coconut that is of this size. That translates to nearly 4 years. When we analyze rainfall patterns, we can observe that Sri Lanka has received the lowest rainfall in 2016. Coconut trees faced an acute water shortage when the fruits had been growing. Due to this reason, a low number of coconuts were harvested that year. Stop cutting down trees and dividing lands to make way for new coconut cultivations and include coconut trees into the Felling of Trees Control Act. Nowadays, we must carry a tape while purchasing coconuts. This is hilarious. Nowadays, this is how the faces of the responsible ministers look like. This is how the faces of the ministers in provinces in which coconuts are sold look like. Various individuals are expressing their views on the coconuts now. Mothers who purchase coconuts are now waiting until they meet the ministers.
ඇයි මේ පොල් ගණන් අපේ රටේ වාර්ෂික පොල් නිෂ්පාදනය ගත්තාම බිලියන 2.8ක් පරිභෝජනයට යනවා බිලියන 1.8ක් ඊළඟ බිලියන 1ක් පාවිච්චි කරනවා කර්මාන්ත වලට. හැබැයි මේ කර්මාන්ත වලට තව බිලියන 1ක අඩුවක් තියෙනවා. ඒක නිසා දීර්ඝකාලීන විසඳුම තමයි මේ ප්‍රශ්නයට පොල් වගාව වැඩි කිරීම. හැබැයි දැන් කෙටි කාලීන වෙලා තියෙන දේ තමයි මේ කාලේ කියන්නේ පොල් වල අවාර කාලේ. ඒකත් එක්කලා පොඩි මාෆියාවක ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා.
මාගාව තියෙනවා මේ ගැසට් නිවේදනය. මම කියවන්න මෙන්න මේම. ඒකේ තියෙනවා අයිතමය වට ප්‍රමාණය අඟල් 13ට වැඩි පොල් ඊට පස්සේ උපරිම සිල්ලර මිල ගෙඩියක් රුපියල් 70යි. වට ප්‍රමාණය අඟල් 12ත් 13ත් අතර පොල් ගෙඩියක් රුපියල් 65යි. වට ප්‍රමාණය අඟල් 12ට අඩු පොල් ගෙඩියක් රුපියල් 60යි කියලා තමයි මේක නිකුත් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. එමතුමනි ඔබතුමා මේ ගමේ ගොඩේ මිනිහෙක්නේ හොඳට පොල් හැදෙන පැත්තේ. මේ වට ප්‍රමාණය අඟල් වලින් පොල් මනින රටක් තියෙනවද මේ?
දැන් අපි අඟල් වලින් හුඟක් ඈතට ගිහිල්ලානේ තියෙන්නේ.
දැන් අපි සෙන්ටිමීටර් මීටර් කිලෝමීටර් ගිහිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ.
අනික ගත්තාම ටේප් එකක් ගත්තා තියෙන සෙන්ටිමීටර් වලින්නේ. ඒක නිසා අඟල් වලින් එහාට යන්න ඕන. අඟල් ඒක මම හිතනවා එතන වැරද්දක් සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම.
අධිකරණ හැමුවේ කෙනෙක් කියන්න පුළුවන්. අඟල් පරිමාව රාත්කල් පරිමාව දැන් ලංකාවට අදාළ නැහැ කියලා. ඒකට මොකද කරන්නේ ඔබතුමා?
ඒක ඇත්තටම ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. ඒක ඇත්තටම මම උනත් කනගාටු වෙනවා. මම ඒක දැක්කහම අඟල් වලින් දාපු එක ගැන මම සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම කනගාටු වෙනවා.
මේ ගැසට් පත්‍රිකාව නිකුත් කරන්නේ මේජර් ජෙනරාල් ශාන්ත දිසානායක විශ්‍රාමික සභාපති. ඒ කියන්නේ පාරිභෝගික කටයුතු පිළිබඳ අධිකාරී. එතකොට ඔබතුමා දැනුවත්ද මේ ගැසට් නිවේදනය පිළිබඳව.
නෑ ඔය රුපියල් 70 කියන සිල්ලර මිල දැම්මේ අපි අමාත්‍යාංශයට අධිකරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා දැනුවත් කළා අපි තමයි දැම්මේ. මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් පාරිභෝගික සේවා අධිකාරියේ ක්‍රමවේදය සකස් කිරීම තියෙන්නේ ඒගොල්ලන්ට. මේ රටේ වැරද්ද ඕකයි. මේ නිලධාරී කරන වැරද්දත් ඕකයි. නිලධාරී ඉස්සෙල්ලාම ගිහිල්ලා වෙළඳ ප්‍රජාව දැනුවත් කරන්න ඕන.
දේශපාලඥයෝ ඔක්කොම නිලධාරීන්ගේ ඇඟට දානවා. අවසානයේ නිලධාරීන් තමයි වැරදි කියලා. ඔබතුමාත් ඒ ගණේ දේශපාලඥ.
නෑ මම එහෙම කියන්නේ මම කියන්නේ එකම දෙයයි. මම පාරිභෝගික සේවා අධිකාරියට ක්‍රමවේදයක් තියෙන්න ඕන කියන එක 100% පිළිගන්නවා සුරංග. ඒ ක්‍රමවේදය වෙළඳ ප්‍රජාව දැනුවත් කරන්න ඕන.
The government has drawn its attention towards not considering land deeds when admitting students into schools. The cabinet, which convened yesterday, decided to issue the circulars regarding this decision in the near future. During the press briefing held to announce cabinet decisions, journalists raised questions regarding several issues that are being discussed at present.
දැන් ජනාධිපතිතුමා කිව්වා එතුමා කියන වාචික ප්‍රකාශ කරන චක්‍රලේඛන විදියට කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා. එතකොට සර් කියන හැම දෙයක්ම සර් කියලා වෙනවද?
ඒක ඇත්තෙන්ම
Actually, this is something that we have to study. This is a new concept. The President presented this concept and now it is the duty of the lawyers to ascertain to what extent this is legal. Without a clear study, we cannot make any statement.
අපිට ප්‍රකාශයක් කරන්න බෑ.
But look on the bright side. Rather than turning this into a joke, I think it is important to see the targets expected to reach through this.
කියන එකයි මම හිතන්නේ වැදගත් වෙන්න ඕනේ.
Questions were raised today at the press briefing to announce cabinet decisions regarding an attempt to provide residences and vehicles to a group of parliamentarians.
මේවර පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට පත්තුරු මන්ත්‍රීවරු අතර සමෘද්ධිලාභීන් ඉන්නවද?
මට අවබෝධයක් නැහැ.
දැන් මෙතන මන්ත්‍රී
Now more than 80 parliamentarians have requested residences. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Public Administration has decided to grant vehicle permits to 79 parliamentarians. When you take a look at the asset declarations of each MP, they have more than 20 million rupees in assets. They have more than 2 or 3 vehicles as well. Don't you think this is not a necessity right now?
මේක අත්‍යවශ්‍ය කාරණාවක් නෙවෙයි මේ අවස්ථාවේ.
අපි රජයේ
Our government granted state vehicles for various individuals based on their positions. We also provided vehicles for parliamentarians based on their official needs.
වාහන ලබා දුන්නා.
I'm asking if a decision has been made to grant vehicles for 79 parliamentarians without any tariff.
එහෙම තීන්දුවක් ගැන අපිට ඒ පිළිබඳව
We were not informed regarding such a decision. The cabinet has not made such a decision. I believe this question must be raised at a press briefing of the Ministry of Public Administration.
අංශයේ මාධ්‍යාමුඛද ඇසිය යුතු ප්‍රශ්නයක්.
Meanwhile, 6 suspects have been arrested for damaging the Ailadi forest in Kantale. This was following a revelation made by Newsfirst. Yesterday, Newsfirst reported how several acres of the forest had been cleared in Kinya in the Trincomalee district. Villagers point out that at least 1,000 plants have been cut down in the forest. Following this revelation, the Wanala police had arrested 6 suspects along with 2 tractors and other equipment that had been used to damage the forest.
යුද්ධය ඉවර කරලා අපි ඉඩම අපිට ලැබලා දුන්නා.
හරි ඔයාලා ඔප්පු වුණත් නැහැ නේ මේවට? ඔප්පු නැහැ නේ.
ඔප්පු නැහැ. පොහොර අරව මේවා අපිට පාස් කරලා දෙනවා සර්. අපි අවුරුදු 30ක් යුද්ධේ ඉඳලා තමයි අපිට මේක ඔප්පු ගන්න බැරි වුණා.
ඔය පොරොස් ටැංකුවද ගස් කපලා වලට මේව කරන්න කියලා.
ගස් කපුවේ නැහැ.
ඒතර මේ ගස් කපලා තියෙන්නේ කවුද උතර?
නෑ මේක අපේ සම්බන්ධ අපි ඉඩම් නෑ.
උතර ඔයාලා අරහෙනි කරන්නේ? එහෙත් ගස් කපලා තියෙන්නේ.
එලට එහා පැත්ත ගස් තිබ්බේ නැහැ.
Meanwhile, Minister of Environment Mahinda Amaraweera engaged in discussions with environmentalists today. Several media organizations and social media reported on the destruction of forests, but most of these reports are not true. Only 4 to 5 incidents have been reported to us. They have filed court cases disregarding the positions. Politicians have been involved in 2 of these instances, a politician from the ruling party and another politician from the opposition. Court cases have been filed against them as well. We have implemented the law. If any officials have been involved, we will take action against them as well.
Rating agency Moodys yesterday downgraded Sri Lanka's sovereign rating by 2 notches to Caa1. In response to the downgrading, the Ministry of Finance stated that the downgrading is unwarranted, especially at a time the government is about to announce a budget for 2021.
Following Moody's downgrading on Sri Lanka's sovereign rating yesterday, the Ministry of Finance responded, claiming the rating action is unwarranted and the downgrade failed to do justice to the ground reality of the ongoing rapid economic recovery backed by vastly improved business confidence arising from the return of political and policy instability after a lapse of 5 years. Moody's investors since downgraded the government of Sri Lanka's long-term foreign currency issuer and senior unsecured ratings by 2 notches to CAA1 from B2 and changed the outlook to stable yesterday. The decision to downgrade Sri Lanka's rating to CAA1 reflects Moody's assessment that the coronavirus-induced shock, which Moody's regards as a social risk, will significantly weaken Sri Lanka's already fragile funding and external positions. The rating agency said the central bank has made substantial liquidity injections, but there were risks to the rupee and inflation. Moody's expects government liquidity and external risks to intensify as the government's external debt service payments amounting to approximately $4 billion between 2020 and 2025 and wide budget deficits in the next few years are likely to require at least partial external financing. Sri Lanka's Ministry of Finance, in response to the downgrading, said that unlike its peers in the emerging market group, the island nation has been able to decisively deal with the domestic spread of the virus and is now moving along a recovery path towards growth and stability. In its statement, the ministry added that merchandise exports have returned to pre-COVID-19 monthly averages of $1 billion and the curtailment of imports, the country's trade deficit has significantly improved. The ministry urged foreign investors not to be dissuaded by the recent unwarranted rating downgrade and the erroneous analysis published recklessly by Moody's.
Countries like Angola, Iraq are in the C credit rating, which is a highly speculative rating. So the investors will have higher risk when they are investing in countries in the C category. The impact would be for the investment because any investor would consider the security of the investment in the first place. So the reasoning that they have provided is the risk on settling external debt, and Sri Lanka has to pay about $4 billion every year for the coming couple of years. Just to give you a picture, $1 billion is about the equivalent amount of Hambantota Port transaction we did in 2017-2018. So we have to do 4 times every year for the coming 3 to 4 years. So that's the gravity of the problem. So Sri Lanka has to put our act together fast and discipline our finances.
Following Moody's downgrade yesterday, Sri Lanka's rupee bond yields were quoted wider today, while the central bank only sold 895 million rupees worth of treasury bills out of a 40 billion offering during its weekly auction today. The central bank had received bids worth 40.795 billion rupees, just 1.01% of what was offered.
So with this double-notch downgrade, there was a immediate spike in the bond market where the yields moved up significantly. We saw yields moving up in the range of 30 to 40 basis points, and with that this had a major impact towards the treasury bill auction as well. The bids also that came were rather low. The accepted amounts were a very low amount. Out of the total of 40 billion, only about 895 million, that is less than 1 billion, has been accepted at the treasury bill auction today.
Following the downgrading yesterday, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed negative today. The all-share price index declined by 34.65 basis points to 5,993.55, while the S&P SL20 closed 19.61 basis points lower at 2,476.11.
For 5 years, GumatDota has walked across the length and breadth of Sri Lanka to lend an ear to the problems faced by the people. Today saw the final day of the 5th edition of the GumatDota Door-to-Door initiative. The question is, why has GumatDota, together with University of Peradeniya, walked from door to door for 5 years?
Sri Lanka is made up of over 14,000 Grama Seva divisions and over 35,000 villages. This complexity demands a systematic approach to understand the challenges faced by communities living in different regions. The GumatDota fivefold approach is founded on the principle of action out of the truth. Established in 2016, the GumatDota five-fold approach focuses on spending time understanding problems through the door-to-door program, collating and analyzing the key issues and preparing a comprehensive report, establishing GumatDota Savia community organizations in villages, collectively planning sustainable solutions to identify issues, and then the final stage of implementing solutions. It is this systematic, principled approach that has resulted in thousands of problems faced by rural Sri Lankans being resolved by GumatDota over the years. As the GumatDota teams ended their fifth door-to-door program today, we would like to thank the villagers in all parts of Sri Lanka who warmly welcomed our teams with an open heart and shared their lives with us. We cannot forget the assistance rendered by state officials, the Sri Lanka police and other officers as well. The commitment shown by Newsfirst journalists and our provincial correspondents was extraordinary, going beyond the call of duty, undertaking arduous journeys, be it travelling by boats or ferries, crossing precarious bridges or visiting villages that are under the threat of being attacked by wild elephants. Whatever it took, the GumatDota teams were prepared to go there for the people. GumatDota and the University of Peradeniya will now compile the fifth report and prepare to continue to serve the people of Sri Lanka.
Yesterday, Newsfirst revealed the difficulties faced by the people as a result of obtaining microfinance loans. These were the views expressed by State Minister Shehan Semasinghe during a media briefing today.
We have held talks with the Secretary to the Finance Ministry. We are also set to hold discussions with the Central Bank and registered microfinance lending institutions. They have already held preliminary level discussions with us. We have implemented a mechanism through the Samruddha Department to collect information from the Anuradhapura district on microfinance. We will receive that report by the end of this week. There is a Microfinance Act in the country. However, unfortunately, the relevant state authorities and other stakeholders are not displaying a favourable approach with regard to this. Therefore, our goal is to amend the Act in a way in which it would suit the modern world. That is an important requirement.
Anuru Lavke, the owner of the 5-story building in Boo Valley Kada Kandy, which collapsed recently, was remanded until the 13th of October by the Kandy Magistrates Court today. He was summoned to police this morning and was thereafter arrested. 3 people died in the incident, which took place on the 20th of September. Amnesty International says it has been forced to halt its operations in India due to reprisals from the government.
The BBC reported that Amnesty International has accused the Indian government of indulging in a quote witch hunt of human rights organizations unquote. Rajat Khosla, the group's senior director of research, advocacy and policy, had said that quote Amnesty International India has been facing an onslaught of attacks, bullying and harassment by the government in a very systematic manner unquote. He cited this as a reprisal to the human rights work that Amnesty International has been doing with regard to several incidents, including the Delhi riots. In a report released last month, Amnesty International said Delhi police had committed human rights violations during the deadly religious riots in February. However, the Delhi police told the Hindu newspaper that Amnesty's report was lopsided, biased and malicious.
From that, we bring to a close this edition of Primetime News on TV1. Take care and good night.